gives birth when doctors realize who the father is. They were shocked. Natalie Carney was diagnosed with cervical cancer more than a year after she first complained of discomfort to her primary care doctor, initially ignored as suffering from female problems and cervical erosion. Before she was diagnosed with cancer, Natalie believes that if she had been pregnant, allowed to get a smear test before, she would have found a cancer victim who was just 22 years old when she underwent a hysterectomy, making her one of the youngest hysterectomy patients in the country. Slammed NHS for failing to give her the smear test she thought would have saved her fertility. Sad news earlier this year forced Natalie Carney into childbirth. Her uterus was removed, and she now risks early menopause, as well as chemo and radiation therapy. Natalie, who became one of the country's youngest ever hysterectomy patients when she underwent the grueling procedure in March, feels she would have not experienced infertility if she'd been legally permitted to get a screening test to detect cervical cancer. Earlier, her cancer could have been cured in its very early stages if she'd received a smear test when she was 20 years old. According to the air hostess, who's coming to terms with the fact that she would be unable to bear children and will experience menopause before her mother, women in England are offered regular smear tests when they're 25 years old, whereas the rest of the United Kingdom offers screening at the age of 20. The screening age was only raised from 20 to 25 in 2003, after health officials concluded that it was more harmful than beneficial in younger women. Nurse Natalie was left suffering from symptoms for months, after doctors missed many opportunities to diagnose her illness. A 3.5-centimeter tumor was eventually discovered after several missed opportunities. Despite her initial optimism that the cancer might be eliminated by fertility-preserving surgery, she was later informed that she would require a surgical hysterectomy, followed by chemotherapy and radiotherapy, to be cancer-free. Currently, she's in a race against time to harvest her eggs before she begins therapy, in the hopes of one day being able to have a child. But Adam Burton, her boyfriend of 6 months, I shouldn't be in this situation. Natalie expressed her displeasure for as long as 18 months before it was diagnosed. My cancer had been growing in my body. If I'd been offered a smear test at the age of 20, the results would have revealed that I had precancerous cervical cancer, and the doctors would have discovered it in time. My future feels like it's been shattered, and I'm being forced to reevaluate my choices. Even though Adam and I have only been together for 6 months, he may now be my sole hope of becoming a mother. Natalie initially notices that in January of last year when she began to have stomach aches, but it wasn't until the discomfort became unbearable in July that she decided to seek medical attention at Nottingham's Accident and Emergency Department. She was dismissed and told she was suffering from women's difficulties. While she was there, Natalie was so concerned about the aches that she made an appointment with her doctor a few weeks later. After a brief external check, Natalie was told that she might have a gallbladder infection, but it was probably nothing to worry about. The pain went away on its own, and Natalie decided not to worry about it, even though the symptoms of cervical cancer usually do not appear in sync. But in November, she began a relationship with Adam, a 23-year-old man, and soon after that she began dating him. Their relationship became physical, however, causing her much more distress when she went to her doctor. After she experienced bleeding, a smear test was not recommended, and doctors instead recommended that she be treated for STDs. Natalie expressed her displeasure with the statement, saying that I felt she assumed I had slept with someone, even though I had not been in a relationship for over a year before getting together with Adam. Like many other young women, I lost my virginity at the age of 16, but I did it responsibly, and I had experienced abdominal cramps for the previous year. I knew it couldn't be like that, but I agreed to the tests, regardless of my intuition. The nurse explained to me that it would be like a smear test, but I had to tell her it would be like a smear. She said I had never had one because I was only 20, and so I was not allowed to have one. It never occurred to anyone to offer me a Papanicola swab, said the woman. Natalie claimed she noticed something was wrong when she started bleeding while those swabs were being collected, because the expression on the nurse's face told her something was wrong. When the doctors arrived, it was decided that Natalie would be referred to a gynecologist for further examination. However, she claimed she was told that because she was young, it was unlikely that there was something wrong with her. Natalie's doctor and gynecologist were sure she was most likely suffering from cervical erosion, a condition which can cause bleeding between periods, and was the cause of her bleeding. Colposcopy and biopsy, on the other hand, pointed to a worst scenario. Natalie's test results showed she had breast cancer. When you were told you had cancer, your whole world is crumbling around you, she explained. When the doctor told me I couldn't take anything else, after that I was devastated for the rest of the day. I was dizzy and sick from not being able to figure out what was going on. Natalie told her doctor after the MRI that she could have a tracheolectomy, which is an operation in which she would have the damaged cervical area removed and then repaired, giving her the best chance of having children in the future. But after further review of the scan, it was determined that the tumor was too massive to be treated that way, and that a radical hysterectomy would be required. was less than 4 centimeters in size, and in the early stages of development, I could never have my own children, because my uterus would be removed, but since I would still have my own ovaries I wouldn't survive menopause, and I could someday use my eggs in IVF, and have children through surrogacy, she explained. Until then I was never really happy about my fertility, even though I was studying nursing at night and concentrating on my professional goals. I always assumed I would have a family of my own someday, and as a result I was forced to think about the future, and that things would not be as I had hoped. Her lymph nodes were removed and tested to determine if the cancer had spread during the 4.5-hour surgery she underwent at Nottingham City Hospital. March. Natalie was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2012. Her illness had spread to her lymph nodes and blood arteries, which meant she would have to undergo 5 weeks of chemotherapy and radiotherapy, leading to a loss of fertility. She was devastated when she heard the news 2 weeks later. Natalie described her feelings as follows: "I was devastated. Every one of my friends would have children, and my sister, who already had a baby, would be addition to their families, and I will never be able to do the same, and I was devastated by this realization. Expected to start my 3 weeks, and it will take at least 4 weeks to harvest my eggs," says the woman. According to the oncologist, "I shouldn't expect funding right now, but they will delay treatment for an additional week." Natalie is now in a race against the clock to harvest enough eggs to allow her and her lover Adam to produce some embryos to be frozen for future use. Even though the young couple had only been together for a short period of time, Adam agreed to the surgery to give Natalie's eggs a better chance of survival. Even if the IVF procedure is successful, there is only a 32% chance that Natalie's eggs will survive. The embryos will successfully implant once they are re-implanted into the body, despite her high risk of developing cervical cancer. Natalie's half-sister Leanne Cook, at age 30, has regular cervical cancer screenings every 6 months. When Natalie's other sister Danielle, at age 20, went to the doctor to ask for a test, the doctor told her she was not qualified because of her family history. Family had a history of HIV. Danielle has an increased risk of cervical cancer because she is a young mother. "I am terrified of chemotherapy, and I try not to think about how bad I will be as a result of it," added Natalie. However, lymphedema, which is one of the common side effects of the drugs they use, is what I fear the most at the moment. "As a result, I am terrified of going through menopause, because neither my mother nor I went through it, and I have no idea what to expect." As part of the campaign for age, Natalie claims to be living proof of how women are ignored by the legal system. The Mercedes Colonel Foundation, created in honor of the woman of the same name who died of cervical cancer at age 23, recently sent a petition to Downing Street, with 122,600 signatures, urging the government to reduce the number of women. The age limit for screening tests is 18 to 16. What is cervical cancer? Generally speaking, cervical cancer can occur anywhere along the length of the cervix. The cervix is the opening that connects the vaginal canal to the uterus, is a component of the reproductive system, and is called the cervix in some circles. Human papillomavirus HPV infection is the most common cause of cervical cancer. In almost all cases, cervical screening, which attempts to detect and treat changes in the cells before they develop into cancer, can often help prevent the disease. Cervical cancer often progresses at an icy pace. The severity of the condition is determined by the size of the tumor, whether it spreads, and your general health. The most common causes of cervical cancer are as follows. It is estimated that almost all cervical malignancies are caused by infection with specific high-risk strains. HPV can be obtained from the following sources. Any skin-to-skin contact in the vaginal area is considered harmful. Sex can occur vaginally, anally, or orally. Sharing sex toys is not allowed who is at higher risk of developing cervical cancer. Cervical cancer can occur in anyone who has cervical. Women, trans men, non-binary people, and intersex people with cervical cancer. Everyone is included in this category. If you have had surgery to remove your uterus and cervix, you are not at risk of developing cervical cancer. Full hysterectomy. You may also be more susceptible to cervical cancer if you have any of the following characteristics. Cervical cancer is more likely in young people under 45. If you have a weakened immune system, such as if you have HIV or AIDS. If you have had multiple children or had children before the age of 17. Hormone Day was injected into your mother when she was pregnant. These dangers can be discussed with you by your doctor. If you have had vaginal, kidney, or bladder cancer in the past, you should consult with your doctor. Thank you for reading.